Well, this was the first assignment that I was given when I joined the SCP Foundation. Wasn't like anybody else's. I was the only one. And at first, it seemed silly because my job was to stare at a box through a window in an observation chamber. Nothing crazy, right? The money seemed plenty good enough, so there had to be a catch. But there wasn't. It was just a normal size box, spray painted silver, with the words, "Here be dragons," written in permanent marker on the lid, otherwise empty and unremarkable in every way. It would have looked to you like a child's arts and crafts project, and nothing more, when all by itself, the box came flying open and out billowed clouds of black smoke and a flock of tiny, flying origami dragons. I had been watching this box for about 6 weeks, 6 or 7, it's hard to tell. In here, they don't let us out. But I finally concluded that this is why the Foundation had kept the box under lock and key. There was something happening inside of it that they didn't understand. Although the box was always empty, the paper dragons and smoke seemed to materialize from the opening as if from somewhere else. The dragons themselves were no children's crafts project either. They were alive, animate, aware of their surroundings. They would flutter around and play happily with each other and me until it was time to go back in the box. They vanished and it was empty again. This went on for some time. Every time it happened, I was forced to call the scientists and the containment specialists, and they came and watched me play with these dragons. It left me wondering why, until one day the dragons brought an answer, or rather, a question. It came in the form of a letter found resting atop a box, which read,
"You have found us. Thank you. It has been so long since we last saw each other. The peace has been upheld. The giants and behemoths have kept their word and have not caused any trouble since you last came and gave the order. We miss your company. How has your family been? Do you still know how to work your room? You're welcome to visit anytime."
The Foundation provides no explanation for the possible implications of that message, but I think it's pretty clear that we're dealing with here. It's not SCP-1762-1 or -2. It is a portal fantasy, like the children in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Some children, through their imagination and creativity, either created or found their way into a fantasy otherworld. Now, for whatever reason, gone away. The denizens of the box await their return. Myself, on behalf of the Foundation, continued to observe. Later the same year, another letter arrived from within the box. This time it said,
"It is strange to see how much your world has changed. It is even stranger to see how we now appear in this place. In fantasy, we are much bigger, or maybe you've grown taller. Fantasy is still the same. We hope you can come visit us like you used to. Though our room is as grand as ever, it appears yours has shrunken. We do not understand. The rooms were supposed to be maintained, as was our agreement. Please restore the belief."
This is where tragedy begins. It seems the dragons were starting to understand that things had changed, though it was difficult for them to grasp how. A child's bedroom, which had been the conduit from one world to another, had now been replaced with a sad little containment chamber, and without the belief of the children who found them, they could only manifest in our world as a shadow of their true selves, these little paper forms. But their hope wasn't gone. They were sure their creators wouldn't abandon them, and only request be set right again. Later that following year, after a long and fruitless wait, the dragons came with yet another letter. This time, instead of brilliant, fluttering flock, hundreds strong, mere 20 emerged. They would not fly, instead they walked lethargically about on their feet. The letter said the following:
"Friends, we apologize for our few numbers. We've had to remain in fantasy for quite some time. The others are growing impatient. We are trying to keep the peace, but please, for all our happiness, repair the room quickly. We are all trying. Your family is the most imaginative of us all."
It seems without the creator's belief, things were not going so well in the world of the box. But not knowing who its owner was, there was little the Foundation, and myself included, could do except for watch and wait. Sometime after that, the Foundation won't say, and I think 3 months, 4 months, I don't know how long after, another letter arrived. This time it came with just 10 dragons. They weren't alone. The box also expelled 3 balls of yellow crumpled construction paper, which shook violently on the ground for several seconds before ceasing all motion. The dragon scooped them up and returned them to the box. The letter read simply,
The giants were foolish. Your room was not ready to accept them yet. We're sorry, friends. We hope we can still see you, but our time is growing short for our happiness.
The dragons, apparently the ones closest to the children, whose imagination made this portal between the worlds possible, were barely able to materialize as paper dolls in the world that doesn't believe in them. The giants never stood a chance. After that, carried by 5 dragons this time, another letter.
Tensions rising. Fantasy is becoming darker. We, the serpents, and the hybrids are furiously trying to hold them back, but the giants and elves wish to strike and make an entrance. They say that your family has grown stupid and ignorant. We hope this is untrue. It would sadden us greatly to know that you have forgotten.
As the reality of their abandonment set in, it seems as though the creatures of the fantasy were becoming more desperate. My guess is that it escalated in conflict not between races of worlds, but between their beliefs, that they must either grasp hold of reality themselves, if they want to be part of it, or trust their fate to the hands of an absent creator. Eventually, a single red dragon pulled itself out of the box, wings torn, noticeably crumpled. It collapsed onto the floor, did not move again. As the life went out of it, the body unfolded onto a sheet of paper bearing a message only 3 words long.
War. Goodbye, friends.
Over the next 6 weeks, the box became a miniature apocalypse. Columns of flame burst from within over and over, hot enough to melt the steel in the ceiling, taller than a man. Distant roars sounded from deep inside, spewed out shreds of torn paper, crumpled paper balls, and lifeless bodies of paper dragons. There were a great many of them at first, but fewer and fewer as the weeks went on. For a while, near the end, instead of scraps of paper, the box began to release what looked like scraps of flesh and muscle tissue. And then, 7 long months, approximately 2 years into my job, nothing. The box lay dormant. When a message finally did arrive, for the first time since the box had come into the Foundation's possession, it came without a messenger. They found it lying inside the box, words blurred and stained with blood on the parchment. It read,
Are you still out there, friends? We miss you dearly. Fantasy is no longer safe. Our haven, your beautiful creation, is gone. The giants are dead. The centaurs are dead. The birds have fled. We are going to bury your room. We cannot risk hurting you. This is our goodbye. Maybe one day, your family can rebuild another room. This may be a hollow hope, but we will cherish this thought.
After the researchers read the message, the box began to deteriorate. The dragon seemed to be holding on to an ember of hope, but it didn't stop the smoke from rising from the box one final time, or the box from sagging, at last collapsing. It didn't stop the cardboard from charring through, crumbling away in small, black-edged holes. It didn't stop the words, "Here be dragons," from burning away forever, but not even the precious, lingering ember couldn't burn forever. After one more period of waiting, entertaining that last hollow hope, the dragons let go. The Foundation received one final message from the box, a papyrus scroll. Most of it was covered in a painting of a mountainous landscape filled with large trees and waterfalls. In the distance, there's what appeared to be a single dragon flying towards the horizon. In the bottom right corner, written in black ink, were the parting words.
Master says that we won't see you again. We are sad. So are the remaining others. Once we filled each other's heads with dreams and goals, it is so sad that we cannot share them any longer. Master says we have to go. He says that he will make us a new fantasy. He says you cannot be part of it. We are sad. We love you. We will not forget you. We are scared. Will you forget us?
As soon as the scroll was removed from the box, salt water began to leak from the charred cardboard. It seemed to wash away the burns, to cleanse all the scars of the war. Within 3 minutes, the entire thing had been restored to its original state. No bigger than a shoebox, spray-painted silver, text written in Sharpie on the lid. Only, now the words, "Here be dragons," had been replaced with words, "Here were dragons." I took a leave of absence to ponder, forced to confront one of the harshest realities, that every fantasy, no matter how precious, how intimate, will die in the end. And it's true for more than just the fantasies of our novels and fairy tales. Fantasies of youth, the fantasy of the permanent self, the fantasy of life, all of them have to pass. I am reminded of the passage of the poem by William Wordsworth, Imitations of Immortality. The opening lines have haunted me since I first read them. There's one time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth, every common sight, to me did seem a paralleled in celestial light. The glory and the freshness of a dream, it is not now as it hath been of yore. Turn whosoever I may, by night or day, things which I have seen, I now can see no more. The promise of the phrase, "Here be dragons," is one of mystery. It tells us that there is a world unknown, that is, this empty part of the map could be home to the creatures of our imaginations. Who can be sure? The cruelty of the phrase, "Here were dragons," is it doesn't even negate that promise. It tells us that it was fulfilled, and that it never will be again. The terrain is mapped, it is known, and definitively where once there were these fabulous beasts and things out of our dreams. We know, now that the magic has passed. As a creative, my instinct is to fight this idea. I've always loved to believe that the dreams outlive the dreamer, that the thought exists independent of the thinker. I still do believe that in some ways, but fantasies are unique to the ones experiencing them. It is what makes them so precious. Give 1,000 people the same book to read and every one of them will see something different in their mind's eye. Sit 1,000 people down to watch a film and they'll have different interpretations and reactions. Give 1,000 writers the same prompt, you'll receive 1,000 different stories. Without all of those individual readers, moviegoers, writers, the versions of the fantasy, unique to all of them, vanish. And it too will happen to each in their time. Either circumstance or mortality will eventually change that person. And so the fantasy must change as well. Our dragons become so many origami dolls. We're all a bit like Peter Pan, perhaps, trapped forever between the world of our fantasies and the harsh outside reality. The world of childhood and the impending world of adulthood. Magic, motivations, the entire story revolves around the knowledge of what's coming. Maybe even when what's already begun. He tries to animate nostalgia into an immortal fantasy, but the tragedy of nostalgia is the feeling of itself is an admission of things lost. By daydreaming backwards, we accept that the fantasy has already died. Our relationship with it will never be the same again. And so, it goes to every fantasy we create, every fantasy we experience. To stay forever is to die ourselves. Otherwise, we always have to return from it. And in some form or another, the fantasy must die. The things I have seen, I can now see no more. It's a sad truth, but I don't just want to make you sad. I brought you here because I think there's something to learn. As storytellers, the knowledge of our fantasies will die one day. It makes them precious in a way something eternal could never be. Just the way the disappearance of the words inside the box awaken us from how precious these tiny paper dragons truly are. Knowing the limitations of our own dreams make the belief window during which we get to live them so much more poignant. It reminds us to breathe every fantasy deeply while you still can. And when the time for dreaming is done, give them a fond, loving farewell. At the very least, don't leave them wondering. In a way, I think it's what we're doing when we share our fantasies with others. The passing of the tale is like a goodbye. You've experienced it, and now you know it well enough to tell it. It's become old, one step nearer the grave. But to the ones you share it with, it's new. Not the same fantasy, but one fresh to their dreaming minds. The fantasy lives on, reincarnated. As if to acknowledge this, the story of Where the Dragons Went ends on one final addendum. After almost 8 years of inactivity, the box stirred. Purple smoke began to rise from it, and as it opened, it fell to the floor, spilling out a large chunk of amethyst and a leather-bound book. The box disintegrated soon after, taking every trace of the world that had been within it. Every trace except the book. Inside, you find the fantasy again, but in a different way. It turns out, someone had traveled the world while it was alive and cataloged its many species and environments. The book is called Beasts of the Old Letters, and through it, the fantasy comes alive in our own minds. It becomes our portal, even without the magic box. Amethyst was inscribed with the words,
One last time.
Sometimes that's all the fantasy needs to be good. Be good to yours. Share them. And with that sombering tale, I'll talk to you nerds later.